or anything you really, really want to know. Cool. So what I think was quite funny was before I was sitting in the bar there with Shell and Mark, and we were just talking about ourselves constantly. We were just going through like us and what we do and our lives and our story. And I think that's really representative of this audience, like millennials, just love to talk about themselves, love to tell their own story, and love to hear other people's stories. Pretty self-obsessed. But that was a funny moment. We were all sitting there and we were like, oh, there we go, okay. So without any further ado, Mark now works at Vice, but I mean, pioneer is a good word, I think. Do you want to give yourself a little intro? Have you got a mic there? Go on, talk yourself up.
Hello. Yeah, so I was very lucky to be around with that guy at the back of the room. He's actually not got a girlfriend at the moment, if anyone's interested. He hasn't had a girlfriend for a long time, actually. Anyway, we were at university together, and we wanted to run a club night at Fabric. And I can see people going, oh, fucking Fabric. And we went to Fabric and we said, would you ever consider this? They said no. We said, oh. They said, if you could book the big artist that we can't book, then maybe. We said, oh, that must be fine. We'll just try that. So we started calling up, the big talent agencies. Hi, we'd like to book, Michael Jackson. He was still alive at the time. It turns out it's quite expensive to book big artists. Someone smarter than us, my brother who was at Harvard at the time, said, look, you're not going to be able to do this with money. You're going to have to offer a service. And so we got his login for Facebook back when Facebook didn't exist in the UK and started playing around with it because, as I've mentioned, we didn't have anything better to do. We had no girlfriends or anything else, and we didn't really have any other friends, actually, apart from just me and Ollie. And long story short, we built what was kind of seen as now the first social media agency. And then years later, we were approached by William Morris, which is a big talent agency, and Ari Emanuel, which is the CEO, is a very hardcore guy. If you've ever seen Entourage, it's basically the character of Ari in that in real life. And he said, we've got two options. I can sue you or I can buy you. Because you owe me loads of money. You've booked all my artists for free for the past 2 years, and I calculate that you owe me about 2 million quid. So you basically can either be bought right now, or I will sue you for that money. So we were like, thank you very much. We would love to work for you. So we became the digital creative directors for the William Morris Network. So that's 4,000 celebrities. Pretty much most of the famous people you can think of are pretty much in there. And it was amazing. And we swore we would never work with brands. I said that, I remember. And then Ollie came back one day from a meeting at Unilever and said, Unilever want us to work on Dove. And I was like, nope, no way. We said we'd never do it. And anyway, what we did with Ogilvy on that was called Dove Beauty Sketches, and it ended up winning like 19 Cannes Lions and being, I think, one of the most watched pieces of branded content.
Stop it, now you're bragging.
And that was when we got approached by Vice, and then we joined Vice after that with the team. So that was it.
That is the story of how to be successful. There we go. Shell, do you want to?
Thanks. Don't know how I'm going to follow up with that. So I'm Irish, moved to London about 8-9 years ago, started out in the shop floor, which I think was one of the best experiences, and was working the shop floor, doing merchandising and actually speaking to customers, which when you're faced with a customer and they're asking you to your face a question, you have to answer it, right? Which is kind of what social media and community management is now, but you have a little hour or two to have a think about how you respond. But yeah, started in the shop floor and then moved to London and started in fashion PR. Fusing fashion and comm skills together. And then about 2 years into that, Twitter launched and bloggers were the buzzword, and brands were trying to figure out how to work with the bloggers and figure out what makes a good blog, what is website traffic, what is click-through, what is affiliate. All of those questions are buzzing around. So at that time, an old mentor of mine was launching a startup called Storyful, and I went to work for the startup. Little did I know that it was a startup, because that was not like words or terminologies that were really happening or buzzworthy then. So that was really interesting. I was a curator of content, which again, when I told my friends I was going to work for a startup to be a curator, they were like, good luck, whatever that is. But I really wanted to learn everything about digital content and communities, and everything that was happening on digital content. And while I was doing that, a few contacts of mine at agencies, PR agencies, were trying to figure out the value of digital PR. What do we offer our clients? Is digital additional service, or is it just something that we actually, is it the new TV, the new like newspaper? Is it just something that we already offer? Also, how do we use it ourselves? So I kind of started consulting and training, and one of those contracts was with Carla Otto, which is a kind of a global luxury PR agency. So they work on everything from Celine to COS. And then I moved on to Net-a-Porter after that to work on social media, which was really interesting, just trying to embrace the whole company into the culture of using social media and making them try to understand what social media meant for merchandisers or buyers or marketing or customer care or editorial. So it was very much about an integration program. So we worked on like project socialization, which is super American, but it was basically about embedding the company to understand social. And then an amazing guy called Alistair Willis reached out via contact of mine. He was basically taking Hunter into this amazing new era, and he wanted someone to like really look after social media and innovation, and that's how I ended up at Hunter. I don't know if that's as good, but no rock stars.
It's a cool story. You're good. And Xenia, you've got 4 million Facebook followers and like something like 1 million Instagram followers. I think, like, how did that happen? Like, I want to know how.
All right. Well, I'm a digital influencer. I'm Swiss-Italian with Russian origins. I live in London. How did that happen? I was working already in media for a long time in terms of traditional media. I was a model, then I became a TV presenter, had my own TV show in Switzerland and Italy. Were face of brands, and really at some point my career kind of hit a plateau, and I was like, I didn't know what to do to expand further. More than that, in Switzerland and in Italy I couldn't have done really, and I was depending on traditional television networks or magazines, and it didn't really fit my profile. I'm very independent, I wanted to be very creative, and I had a girlfriend who was already a pioneer blogger, who now is also a very, very important, very famous fashion blogger. And we name them now influencers. You don't say in the fashion industry, she knows, Michelle knows, you don't say blogger.
Publishers.
Yeah. It's not cool anymore, you say influencer. A blogger is just probably a starter, somebody who's just trying to publish, trying their way out in the industry. And right now for me it's more like when you're creating content at a higher level, curated content for brands, you're called digital influencer. So anyway, I was I studied economics, I worked in finance, and then meanwhile I had a career in media. And at some point I was very lost. I was like, I don't know what to do with my life because I have all these opportunities but nothing really fits me properly. And this girlfriend of mine was already trying it, and she's like, try it. And I ventured into it just by starting publishing a few lifestyle content. Pictures of me traveling, pictures of nice architecture, of beautiful sceneries, or jewelry, cars. And it started growing really, really fast. And from 60,000 followers, I reached 1 million just in less than a year. And I realized that they wanted to see more fashion. Everybody was asking me, what shoes am I wearing? What dress is that? How do I do my hair? And hence, I started doing that. And it worked out really well.
4 million followers.
And it became a profession. It became a proper profession. And I mean, there's a lot behind it. There's a lot of analytics behind it. There's a lot of structure behind it in terms of how you publish, why you publish. And there is agencies in between me and the brands. So sometimes it's direct, sometimes the agency themselves create a project. So it could be, a project of a few pictures, videos, or it could be a trip, an event. I even worked with Vice. You know that, Mark. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting, growing profession. And every day there's something new. There's a new social media network, and you need to evolve very, very fast.
And Alexandre, you've built a clothing brand off the back of digital influencers like Xenia. So just tell us a little bit about your story and how that happened.
Okay, I'm Alex. So I'm CEO of RAD. I live in Paris. I'm 27. I started working in the digital Word at the age of 12. I was selling movies online, but it was forbidden at that time. Then 10 years later, I started my career in finance, and quickly I realized that it was not what I liked, so I started working in a startup, a fintech startup. At the time, the word fintech didn't exist. So I did that for 2 years, and then I met my current partners at RAD that were starting this flash sales website. So we started RAD 3 years ago as a flash sales website, selling cool products, a little bit like Fab, but it was focused on France. And we started selling cool products from the UK, from US, from Japan, and finding always the best product, the best price. And the website became viral very fast. 6 months later, our suppliers couldn't follow our growth, so we started doing our own products. And now we are running the first digital brand in France. We have 1.6 million followers on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And we are developing a lot with social networks like Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook. I'm working both on the supply and demand side, and I've a strong interest for all the digital strategies. It's evolving very fast, and I think today we have in this panel a very interesting mix because we have new media, we have two brands, one new, one older brand, and we also have a digital influencer. We work with a lot of digital influencers today, and
so I think there's an interesting commonality between all of us, which is that digital was the springboard for whatever we were doing, whether as an individual or as an employee or as a party promoter or as a guy selling clothing. I think maybe the most interesting one that we haven't talked about a lot today, Michelle, you work at Hunter, which, I mean, my dad owns a pair of Hunters and isn't exactly in this target audience. So, I mean, how do you protect your heritage brand and not get rid of that really core consumer? And how do you make sure you're staying true to your mission and at the same time communicate and attract a new audience? How does that balance work out?
So I think it's probably by defining what heritage means to your brand. So for us, it means progressive. We could have done the very traditional, archaic kind of way of approaching our brand, but our creative director, Alistair Willis, really wants to take the pioneering spirit of our founders from 1856 and take that spirit and make sure that we're applying that today, not just in the creative execution, but actually just in the way that we approach our projects or approach our partnerships, influencers and things like that. And really, I suppose the grand answer to that question, is that we launched brand segmentation. So Hunter, like 3 years ago, was just the Hunter umbrella. Now we have Hunter Original, which is our fashion and festival brand, and then we have Hunter Feel, which is our performance, lifestyle, outdoor category brand. So it allows us basically to be able to speak to those different audiences, and even within Original, be able to speak to the festival audience in the UK or just during festival season, and then be able to speak quite authentically in the fashion conversation as well. And then as well for being able to engage with the field audience, and I think what's really important within those is community. So it's really important that for us, and really important for everyone to take away today, is Hunter has a massively broad church of customers. So I have everyone from my little niece that has a pair of Hunter boots, right, to you see Sarah Jessica Parker on the street in New York wearing a pair of Hunter boots. We had our Kate Moss moment, obviously, which accelerated into this fashion conversation, but equally my friends on the west coast of Ireland are wearing them on the farm. And then we worked with these cold water surfers who actually we found out were using our product. They were living off the land, and then they were like jumping down into the sea and going cold water surfing. So I think for us, we have this huge broad church of customers, but function is really like a connecting narrative no matter the community. So heritage for us is very much approaching from a progressive point of view and always listening to our communities.
So you've approached a huge number of communities there in a really authentic way by segmenting them out. I think, Mark, you work for Vice, who've kind of, I guess, made their name by helping brands be more authentic with millennials. How does that work at scale, right? Because Hunter are doing it with, across the globe, but with specific communities. How do you work with pretty much every top 100 brand in the world has worked with Vice now. How do you work with all of those brands and help them connect authentically with this audience?
Hello. I think what Michelle's saying is, I mean, full disclosure, we've already chatted before and had a bit of a love-in where we went, oh, I really respect you and really respect you. But the brands that are winning, look, anyone here work for a brand? Okay. Branding is a really simple thing. The word branding means taking a product, like a button on a phone, which isn't that exciting, and putting it into culture. That's what branding is, right? And if you do it well, you create a distinct memory structure, and then you use media to refresh that distinct memory structure with loads of reach and loads of frequency so that people keep it top of mind, and then they remember your brand heuristically and they buy you. That's the theory of branding, right? Somehow, digital wrong-footed every single brand, and I don't know how. Like the Mad Men era of brand strategy and building a really clever, intensely strategic base of thought that went above this, this is not just a caffeinated, like, fizzy water, right? This is a powerful thing. There's a whole set of suppositions underneath this strategically, right? Suddenly, digital came along, and everyone went, oh, throw all that good thinking away.
So you're really just applying Don Draper to the modern world, is
In
that?
a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I think the mistake about Vice is to think that everything we do, from the way we dress to everything, is all the strategy. We're the most strategic guys on the block. That's why, because when a brand comes to us, we say, yeah, look, we might look like we're fucking idiots, but honestly, we do think about things. And this is what you've lost. You forgot your brand strategy and you started focusing instead on all the tactics. So what you'll do is you'll come along and you go, not being funny, but like you'll say, we've got to get an influencer. And then no one says, is that part of a strategy or is it just a little thing that we're going to do, right? And it should be part of your strategy, I must say, right? But the point is, everyone forgot about the strategy.
That was a good save.
So the way that we work with I think brands come to us and they're like, right, let's see what these kids have got to say. And we say all the classic stuff about marketing that their creative agency have forgotten about. Because the creative agency running around in the media agency are like, oh yeah, just keep paying us because none of your creative ideas work anyway, so you're going to have to put loads of paid behind it to make it fly. So they're just like, yeah, keep it coming. We don't want those ideas to work. So the more they don't work, the more you've got to go to Unruly and seed it or something, right? So we just say, come back to adding value to the equation so that the audience get value, and it's done in a strategic way that means that only your brand could have done that, and you win.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Don Draper, I think. That's cool, yeah. I just want to be you, that's great. No, cool. So I think we've talked a lot about like how you do it. I think, like, obviously you guys are experts in platforms. So like where? Because Facebook, Instagram, like...
Oh, it changes all the time. It depends for the industry you're in, really, and it depends what the hype is. So fashion brands nowadays prefer, correct me if I'm wrong, Instagram at the moment, although it's not necessarily analytic-wise the best. It's just because it's the hype, and marketing-wise they think it's the most visually beautiful tool at the moment. It might change. Live video, it's taking a lot of control right now. So Snapchat's going really strong. Facebook is pushing Facebook Live extremely right now. Mark Zuckerberg talked about it recently. So they're pushing everybody to go live. And I think we're going also towards artificial intelligence and a lot of, what's going to happen in the future year or two. I think where, and also the branding strategy, it's a big point, because the question is, how do you create fast content that looks good and that conveys your branding idea? At the same time, you do it maybe quickly live and in a way that doesn't harm your brand. So this is a very big question because it's so fast-paced. Even fashion brands right now, they're starting to make collections available right from the runway. So before fashion weeks, where there was a fashion week and the collection would come month after. So magazines could shoot it, there was a delay, there was time, there was a wait. Now, with social media, everything is so available to us, we can see it so quickly, and everybody wants to buy it straight away. So even fashion brands now have to adapt to the social media world, to the fact that you can buy straight away from the runway, from the moment you see it online.
And Alexandre, Shell's from a brand which has kind of reinvented, or taken its original mission, become authentic for communities on digital. You've created a clothing brand which, despite more established brands having more resources, a more established customer base, every single competitive advantage that at business school you're taught is going to make you win, you've created a brand via social media that is now more powerful in France than some of the established brands. What do you think the opportunity there is on social media? Like, how do you leverage that opportunity as a new brand and as an established brand?
Just to give some context about RAD, on the contrary to classic brands, is born on social networks. 3 years ago, the hype was Facebook, and we took advantage of it, and the brand started getting viral on Facebook. Right now, Instagram is offering a better visibility because you have almost 100% reach to your audience. The engagement is better, and people are just spending so much more time. Consumers are spending so much more time on Instagram. But what is important is really to adapt. Right now, Instagram represents almost 25% of the traffic on our website, but we can already see that for some influencers, their Snapchat is even more powerful and bringing more people to the website. It's harder to measure, but what you really need to do when you run a brand is really to think, where is my audience and what is my audience doing with the social networks. If we think of kids that are 15 years old, they are literally spending 1 hour or 2 hours on Snapchat every day to text with their friends, but also to follow their favorite stars. And it's a different thing to see a beautiful Instagram account and to follow the live feed of your favorite singer, because you are in his life. It's very raw. It's not beautiful. It's very true. And I think that right now, this new generation of consumer, they just don't react to a beautiful picture that was taken by an amazing photograph. They will not make the difference between that and a picture that represents the truth of someone using a product, the truth of someone wearing a product. And for brands that are trying to evolve or trying to emerge today, these tools, these networks are offering amazing places to show content.
So it's about sort of figuring out what your overall strategy is, targeting specific communities and being really true to them and where you're talking to them. Is that kind of where it's at? Yeah. And then I think to follow on from what you were talking about on Snapchat, who in here is going to invest in video in the next 12 months or has already? One person, I don't believe that. That's a complete lie. Okay, I'm assuming everyone in here is going to invest in video. So how, like, Mark, I mean, Vice is like, I don't know, is like Vice and video, just like brothers and sisters. So for brands, how do you go about, because video is really expensive, right? So you got to go to your MD and be like, hey, can I have 200 grand to invest in this video? How does that, like, how do you do it? Like, because it's quite affordable and authentic on Snapchat, but very difficult to do. And then YouTube is a completely different platform. Like, what's the game with video? Tell us the secret. Like, how does it work?
Good question. I get asked the question about how do you succeed in video all the time. And I like to have fun with it and say it has to be 2 minutes, 36 seconds long with this filter. And people go, let me get my pen. Because all of us are deeply emotionally intelligent human beings. Right? I don't know any of you, really, apart from Ollie, unfortunately. And I love you all. I hope you do really well in your lives, and your life is painful, right? So I wish nothing more than for you to be happy, right? So take this information because it will make you happy. If you want your brand to work, remember that if it looks like it's been scripted, it will perform about a third as well as if it looks like it has not been scripted. That's why all Vice footage is unscripted documentary style. I'm not saying that everything we do is completely random because of the strategy thing I said earlier. But part of the strategy is to make it look like it's strategically not strategic, right? So just don't show the strings.
Just before you destroy the Vice brand, any
Yeah.
millennials in here right now, leave the room.
I'm talking about brand work here. Only brand work.
Only brand work.
Only brand work.
Okay, no, that's
The point
good.
is, real, humanized brand stories do exist. They're part of your owned assets. We got so busy talking about paid media that we forgot that paid media is a liability on a business account. It's not an asset. Our assets are our earned and owned pieces of media. And they're the human stories at the center of our brands. And those human stories will work if you tell them well. And you don't have to go and spend a load of money at the beginning. You can use social to kind of have a little bit of a snack, and then you can move it up to a meal, and then you can make the feast at the end. But that is what works every time. And because, look, if someone's got another idea that's better than this, come to me and I will invest in you right now, right? Because Netflix is spending $6 billion on humanized content stories this year, right? Because once we get home at night, we have about 2 hours after dinner to spend some time with the person we love. And what do? We sit down in front of a screen and we share emotions with other human beings that we've never met before. And we cry and we laugh and we feel captivated like we haven't all day long. And for 1 or 2 hours a day, we feel alive, right? That's what content can do if you take the opportunity to do it and tell human stories. If you do a dancing gecko that your creative agency has recommended that runs around the screen, you've wasted your own money and your own time. That's all I got to say.
I'd add to that. I think there's storytelling, which is really important for branding, but I think there's insight-driven content as well. I think a lot of brands do a lot of these hero pieces of content, which are really great for elevating the brand story. But one of the kind of projects that we've been working on internally at Hunter is actually creating more of that agile content, but also that's really insight-driven. And it's really important, like, I know when I started out in social media, people were like, oh, you post to Facebook? Like, what does that mean? A lot of it has to do with engaging with your community or just listening to them. A lot of brands publish content on social media, but they don't actually engage with their community. And one of the things I love at Hunter is that we're a really democratic and engaging brand. Like, we always respond to our customers. And when I say customers, I don't just mean product questions, like, I bought my first pair of Hunters, or I got married today and I wore my Hunters. They're really important stories for us to engage with. But looking at the insight that we see, from YouTube, we really kind of deep dived into YouTube, and we were looking at the kind of questions, obviously, and searches around our brand. And one of them was, how do I clean my Hunter boots? Right. We were like, not the sexiest video to create, but the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of searches that we were getting for this every single month across our direct markets showed to us that this is a really important piece of video content that we need to generate for our customers that is going to be really meaningful to them. So in addition to the kind of hero storytelling pieces where we speak to weather and the emotive connection with us and festivals and things like that, I think it's also really important for brands to look at insight-driven content as well. Like, what are your customers actually asking for?
I think that's an interesting, when I speak to brands, the first question is often like, I just don't understand what this audience is thinking. It's like, it's before even having thought about what we're going to talk about, or I just don't understand what they're thinking and why they're wearing those clothes and that haircut, and I'm just so confused. And there's a whole understanding thing there, mostly related to just not understanding their kids, and they're like, okay, I'm just trying to get over that before I get millennials. But, how do you answer that question? You've talked about listening to your customers, but how, Xenia, when you're talking to fashion brands, how do you help them understand what younger consumers are looking for?
So first of all, often people ask me if I delegate my social media, and the answer is no, never, because you need your connection to the audience. It's fundamental. You need to know your people. You need to read the comments. Sometimes you gotta answer. You gotta be there. And also, to tag along about what Mark as well was saying, is people are tired of Photoshop. People cannot take those beautiful pictures anymore because there's such an overload of content out there. We all see these beautiful fake pictures everywhere. That's why live content is getting so massive. There's a connection to your audience. There's a direct kind of live human element. And it's now what's working the best in terms of also click-through and sales for brands, really. Because if I say on Snapchat, guys, look at my shoe, actually, it hurts, or actually it's amazing, it's so comfortable today, I feel beautiful. It works. I see people reacting. I see comments about it. They're like, really? How is it walking in it? And the human element right now is imperative.
So just engage directly with them on platforms.
Engage directly, know your audience, really, personally, the more you can, I have a really good feel of my audience, and I keep track on it, really, because that's the winning factor, I think, right
Alexandre,
now.
I know, like, you are super, we were talking before, and you're, like, looking at analytics heavily on different platforms and where people are spending time. From, you're at a brand. How do what are the numbers and the metrics that you look at when you're trying to understand where your audience is and how to talk to them?
You speak in terms of content, the best metric will always be the engagement. The engagement for a picture would be the number of likes, but also the number of comments, the number of people that are tagging their friends. Is your picture viral or not? I mean, this is for Facebook and Instagram. For Snapchat, you can look at the number of people that have actually viewed your story. I mean, looking at the story of someone is a big engagement from a customer, because he needs to go into the app, he needs to select your account, he needs to stay on your account and wait for the picture. He can take screenshots. All these are the different metrics that we are looking at.
So just for like, does reach matter? Just as a number, independent of engagement, I can see, no, do you have an opinion on this, Mark? No, you don't?
I have an answer to it.
You got an answer to that? Does reach matter?
Well, just for Hunter specifically, like reaching, we are talking about college kids, right? Reaching 5 kids. I always talk about the power of 5 in a news feed, right? Like if you can reach the 5 people, you reach their 5 people, you reach their 5 people. So I think like reach is like, it sounds like this big word, but actually it can be quite like a local word as well. So, and like I know that from like, I always use this as a point of reference, which can be funny, but there's a Twitter account called The Farmers of the UK, right? It's every week a farmer takes it over and it tells this authentic human story about what it's like to be actual authentic farmer in the UK, the trials and tribulations of it. And
millennials can be farmers too, but I know loads of farmers who are also millennials.
One of the best Instagram farmer accounts I've ever seen is Indie Farmer. He's like and Benjamin Hull, over 150,000 followers, and has the most beautiful images of the British countryside. So I think like going back to it is like that Farmers of the UK Twitter account has 15,000 followers. But I tell you what, it probably has one of the most engaged Twitter followers, like probably in comparison to ones that have these big broad reach. And I think when you come back to what's happening in all the algorithms of Facebook and things like that, it's about engagement rather than reach.
That's a really interesting point, because we've got, so like big brands will have like a big Facebook page. So in the UK, we've got 60 Facebook pages with like different amounts of likes, but the engagement rate on those pages is like 15 to 20%, which means that of our like 400,000 likes, they're so much more powerful than 20 million. Just like, how do you keep that engagement rate really high? Like, what are the things you need to pull on? You've talked about authenticity and is that?
Yeah, my Facebook page, luckily, is very, very engaged. And I sometimes try to say to brands, Instagram is great, but my engagement on Facebook is as high, if not higher. Not everybody knows it. Not every brand knows how to have a Facebook page with good engagement. They just put out content without, checking the reaction. It's very important. Sometimes there's certain ways to adapt to the algorithm. You need to know the algorithms of Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. So you cannot post at a time where nobody's online, for instance, because then you're not going to get a reaction. And if you do it a few times in a row, your page is going to start declining in terms of engagement. Fundamental to know how to post and how your audience reacts, yeah.
And I just want to quickly, before we go to FAQs, we had a F8 earlier this week, which I'm sure everyone know what F8 is? Yeah? No? Who doesn't know? Shake it. Okay, so F8 is the developer conference for Facebook, where Mark Zuckerberg stands up and gives a really awkward speech about how he's going to change the world in the next 10 years. And every young CEO is like, God, I wish I was that guy. I'm telling that from the heart. But yeah, so one of the big things he talked about was messaging and bots. And I flew to Hong Kong last week with KLM, and I didn't have to download an app. I didn't have to talk to a human, which was great. Because they're Dutch, and I don't speak Dutch. But they Facebook messaged me my boarding pass, they Facebook messaged me my flight details, everything. And we were talking before about messaging, and like, how are you thinking about this for the next? You've been a first mover in social media. How's Rad going to be a first mover in messaging?
What you're saying is that emails is for grandparents? No?
I mean, I don't want to say that, but yeah.
No, messaging is huge. This is where we spend most of our time. And this is why Facebook acquired WhatsApp. This is why Snapchat is growing so fast. This is why Messenger is a success. I think the next challenge will be for this platform to make a great platform for brands as well. And a way to connect with your customer will be maybe to have your brand into Messenger, to launch the big news through Messenger or any other messaging app. And this is something really new. Conversational commerce is quite starting, but we are looking at that very closely. Why? Because when you think of it, why should we ask a customer to download an app if he is already spending 1 hour of his day in another app? It will be so much harder to get him spend time on your app that sending the good information, the good content will be really easier with messaging apps. So yes, this is something huge, and they announced that they are opening their platform on Messenger.
Yeah, so I think they're opening Messenger for everyone, right? Open source. Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. Okay, cool. We've got, I thought we were running till 1:15, but apparently we've got 17 minutes left. But this really threatening timer right here, which is just ticking away. So I feel like I'm at a TED talk. Cool, all right. Do you want to ask some FAQs? Yeah, she's some FAQ. Does anyone have a question? Man in the leather jacket. Do you want to borrow this? There you go.
Thank you. Alessandro from Lush Cosmetics. Hello. The next step for global brands is really go across languages as well. Any thought on that?
I know Shell Hunter just launched a store in Tokyo, and we were talking about, do you want to go for that?
Yeah. Well, I think there's probably two parts to it for us in terms of globalizing our brand. It's about trying to understand what's the connecting narrative between all of our global customers, and that definitely is function. And we always kind of joke, it's always raining somewhere. Now we actually joke that there's always a festival on somewhere. It used to be kind of just Glastonbury for us, but now we just literally did a festival before Christmas in Hong Kong and Thailand and things like that. So it's kind of intense for us. But in terms, to answer your question on globalization, of globalizing our brand, we've launched a global website. We looked at translating our content in terms of storytelling content, but I think first step for brands is definitely in the transactional, make sure that the user experience on the site from a very much product descriptions first is there, and I think that's definitely an interesting first step for a brand to take, and then trying to find ways to engage with your audience on a local level, and looking at the platforms that are obviously relevant to that market. But for us, the way that we also look and approach our local markets is actually in the product. So for our New York customer, they wear our boots when it's snowing, but we're not traditionally a snow boot, right? So listening to the feedback from our New York customers, they were we really want a warm, but we like the rubber Wellington boot because it keeps us away from the slush. So okay, let's take this on board. So we developed a down-filled boot, right? Not totally game-changing, but for that customer in New York, it was. And then the same again, looking at our APAC customers for rainy season. So our knee-tall boot, it's quite warm to wear during rainy season in the APAC. So we've developed Chelsea boots and looking at other ways we can develop our footwear products for that customer. So we approach it in two ways, one in terms of our transactional experiences on our site, and then through product, which I think for us, in terms of function, if that's a key message for us, it needs to be functional for those particular customers.
Xenia, you were jumping at that, I think, because you've got global reach, right? So how?
I mean, I have this challenge. I speak several languages, and I have people. Well, I have a big chunk who speak English, so my main language is English. But then I speak. My first language is Italian.
What are you posting on Facebook?
English.
In English?
But there are some situations in which I add another language. It could be because the brand wants to target a certain audience in a certain country, so I do that. Or it's simply because I think it would be more engaging in a certain point. So there's a lot of Spanish speakers, a lot of Italian speakers on my pages. That's a bit of a challenge as well, because you cannot really post something and target only the Italian speakers. You can target it with an ad or a sponsor thing, which I don't like to do because I think it slows your pages down. This is my personal strategy. I prefer organic. But for now, social media doesn't have a way to only target one language. Hence, I always do the main language, English, because it's international and supposedly everybody understands it. And then I tag or write, not a translation, a personalized sentence in another language. Translation is boring and it sounds fake. It sounds not personal, not human. So yeah, I try to do that. And on Snapchat, I just speak any language. I just speak.
So Alexandre, as a brand that started in France and is now moving out across like European and global markets, that obviously that's a challenge because less people speak French than English or Spanish, for example. So how have you met that challenge? How have you met a global audience?
So we were lucky because we already had an international catalog. Our products are mass market products, so we didn't have to change our product. We started with the US, which is the biggest market for fashion, and now we are a lot focusing in Europe because we feel that competition for fashion is maybe smaller in Europe. You can be the first and be a leader more quickly. If we talk about social media and the way to communicate internationally, if you think of it, the language that is the most used online is emojis. If you look at the biggest stars that have dozens and dozens and millions of followers, they are likely to post only one emoji or even nothing, just because when you have 40 million followers, you can't speak one language. And this is something we use every day. We use it in emails as well. We use it in every post we send, because you can describe an emotion, you can describe a product, you can make a joke. It's really fun, and this is really the way our customers are reacting.
That's cool. So the language of emotion is global. You don't have to speak a specific language. That's a good answer. Any others? Yeah.
Sorry, can I just add one thing there?
Sorry, Mark, I just
quickly.
completely ignored you there. I was just...
Do you know what the most...
I knew you were going to talk. I was like, I'm going to ignore him and see
Also,
if he's... There
we've
we
got to full disclosure again, we work together, so...
Okay, all right. Is there anyone Mark hasn't worked with? Anyone at all?
A few over here, I don't know who they are just yet.
Okay.
Yeah, Ollie. This is, take this with a pinch of salt. What's the most powerful brand of the last 5 years?
Ice? No. Yes.
ISIS.
That was the right answer.
ISIS,
No.
right?
ISIS.
ISIS.
Right.
The most powerful global brand of the last 5 years is ISIS, the Islamic State, right? Because they've realized, before everyone else, that the nation state and the borders that used to define the nation state mean fuck all, right? So why has Vice become a $4.5 billion business? Do you know why? Because all that local market stuff that brands spend all their time doing, because actually, if you took away all that brand bureaucracy, they would realize they're not doing anything else, right? So all that fighting the local market and global media trying to get budget from here and all that stuff, we don't have any of that. We just go around interests and passions. So, and everybody who's smart realizes that that nation state means nothing, and that nation state means nothing, and actually most of the language barriers don't mean as much anymore either. But if you build around passions and interests, you can scale really, really fast. But brands are so interested in supplying content where there is no demand for it, but making sure that the translation is done by the local market teams, that they have completely looking at the telescope the wrong way round. And then we come along and go, you should probably spin it round the other way. And then they go, oh my God, it's working, right? I'm trying to be nice, but also have fun with it. I'm not doing very well. Anyway, the point is that the nation state is something that we've obsessed over as brands. And I've worked with big brands like Unilever where it's all about, every second word is local market buy-in and local market buy-in. And everybody wants to kill themselves because all we need is one veto from one guy in Italy, no Italian, who says, I don't like it because my local thing isn't that. And then you don't have a global brand anymore, right? You just have local pockets of brands with everybody doing their little brand stuff. And that's the collapse of a global brand. Meanwhile, ISIS and Vice, right, and I love those two together, are going, you know what?
You guys should totally work together. Can you imagine how powerful that would be? That would be insane.
But you know what? We're both burning through the rules at exactly the same rate. So the point is, the rules have changed. Forget millennials and Gen Z. It doesn't mean anything. All you've got now is a connected world with 2.5 billion people connected together for the first time ever, and they can meet each other online. And your message isn't as interesting as what they are saying to each other. And if you don't accept that, all the local market stuff in the world can't help you.
So you've got to find one touch point that connects all those people, whether it's function. I saw a great, it was at the Sevens, there was a guy wearing Hunters in his outfit, and it went from a boot to a beer jug in like 10 seconds. And I was like, wow, that's a whole new function that I should tell you about. So
Yeah, you should see what I see on social day in, day out.
Should invest in that, like a Hunter beer jug. That would be great.
Yeah, but I wouldn't underestimate language. I mean, I do everything in English, but when I say something in whatever language, in French, it touches the French. It touches their emotion. They're like, oh, wow, she's speaking our language. So that works. That gets through. Language, not national borders at all.
Social media auto-translates, right? Does it? If you're on French Facebook, does it translate your post from English to French? It doesn't.
No.
Oh yeah? It's not a very good translation. Okay. See, that's one language guy right here. Never seen that before. Any other questions?
So you're all in the content and publishing and production for other reason than the creation itself. So you have businesses to run, of course. Some people call it native advertising and blah, 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 blah. Are you not afraid of the future and the future challenges in terms of ethical issues and everything else, and the sustainability of the business model as a whole?
Okay, so native advertising. And the question there is about how native advertising affects publishing businesses and their ethics. Is that, yeah? Is that correct? Okay, cool. So maybe let's start with, I mean, Vice.
I'll get out of the way.
Authentic youth brand. Children deeply believe in you guys.
Children?
Kids, young people, me. I deeply believe in your truth. So, I mean, most people in this room would call me a kid, let's be honest, all right? So, we deeply believe in what you're telling us, and it's important they continue to believe that. So, when you're working with Unilever to sell more shampoo, how do you make sure that you're not diluting that and you can still tell authentic stories?
This is why I loved, before I was at Vice, Ollie and I would just take money from brands for anything. We never returned a brief, ever. Why would you? It's money, isn't it? So a brand comes, like, no disrespect, but like a kind of what I would call a late majority kind of on the innovation bell curve, brand manager person would come to you and say, we want to do something around Banksy. He's getting big. Now, in 2016, right? You'd go, Banksy? That was 2003. But you wouldn't say that. You would say, sure, how much? Right? And you would do it because as an agency, your job is to just say yes and take the cash. That's what you do. That's how we built our business, right? At Vice, annoyingly, they've got this thing where it's all got to be leveling up to one factor, which is trust. So if Vice thinks that by doing this, they will lose the trust of their audience, they say no, which is unbelievably frustrating if you're on commission, right? I have to explain a lot of things about why I can't afford things anymore. Anyway, the point is, and by the way, I think that's quite fresh and quite unique in the agency landscape for anyone to say no to money, right? And the reason is, if that isn't good enough to sit in culture and for us to sit alongside it, just one thing about Vice, it ain't that clever. It's a very powerful, trusted brand that has extended itself across 13 different interests and passion points. From food, which is our Munchies channel, to our female-focused channel, which is Broadly, which we launched with Unilever, to now we're doing travel, gaming, sport. It's the same brand underpinning just different passion points. If we lose that, we are gone. So one of the things is that is the hardest possible thing to maintain. So that's why we sometimes say no to brands.
So you've got to say no, basically, when someone asks you. And as an individual, how do you manage
Totally.
that?
This is actually now the new difference between blogger, who takes anything, and influencer, who kind of builds a trust, a brand for themselves and an image. And you got to stick to it. So if a brand that doesn't fit my image, like a protein shake, comes to me, even if they pay a lot, I have to say no. I say more no than yes. But on the long run, it really does pay off, first of all, in terms of reputation, in terms of trust from your people, from your audience, in terms of collaborations long term, and transparency is another big point. So if you are advertising, you have to somehow let people know this is an ad. In America and the US, now it's actually mandatory in social media. You have to hashtag ad or sponsored, or you can get in trouble.
Any others?
Sorry. Are consumers becoming increasingly cynical about sort of native content and those sorts of advertising? They expect it, it's how they get their content, but do they believe brands anymore? Do they believe publishers anymore?
So the question is native advertising, consumers cynical about native advertising, and therefore is it becoming more ineffective?
Yeah.
I think an interesting second bit to that is like, how do we tell? Like, what's the metric for that? But do you want to go, Shell?
I think if you look at like display banners, like I think we forget how clever people are. We've like developed the skill to completely ignore them visually. Like how many websites have you been on? You're like literally not looking at that space. Like
would anyone on the
stage
stage advise someone targeting millennials to invest in banner advertising? No. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So continue.
I think.
Yeah,
well,
that's all right, right? If they're giving away money, that's fine. Yeah.
I think it's about the platform, right? So it's like, I was having a conversation with my colleague earlier about like the .com. Like, do people go to .coms anymore? Like how are people discovering your content? It's, shareability within the friends. It's in the algorithm of the newsfeed. It's in discovering trending topics and things like that. Like, I don't know if there's that much like, oh, I must go visit .com today, or I must download that app and that app and that app and that app. Like as you said in your approach, like wait a second, if everyone's already on Facebook, maybe we should be investing in Facebook, or if everyone's on Instagram, maybe we should try get into that newsfeed, as opposed to trying to develop a competitor. Like I think when brands like we're launching a social media network, I'm like that's a horrendous idea. Like you're never going to be able to mark Zuckerberg and wear grey shirts and have an F8 conference, right, and say that the future is AI and integrated live video and all that kind of stuff and VR. So I think it's about getting to the cross feed of that customer.
To answer your question quite directly, the Tab is the second publisher in the world to go native advertising only as a revenue stream for, not Forbes, BuzzFeed's obviously the first, the most famous. And I was speaking to a friend at the New York Times the other day about this question, because obviously it's massive for them and it's very important for us. And for us, it's about looking at metrics. So like we can say however much we want, like yes it isn't, no it isn't, like unless there are numbers there that we can use to back it up. So we benchmark our sponsored stuff on engagement against our editorial, and to date, every sponsored story that we've done has performed better in terms of engagement than editorial. And it should, right? Because if a brand is coming to you and saying, hey, here's 10, 20, 30,000 pounds, and we want you to create a piece of content, and we create like hundreds of pieces of editorial every day, and then a brand comes to you and says, we want you to spend more time on this because we're paying you to do it, and it doesn't perform as well as your editorial, what the hell are you doing? It's like you're gonna buy a car, and someone says, hey, I'm gonna give you 10 grand for this beautiful car, and the car salesman goes out the back and picks up this shitty second-hander and goes, oh, you can have this one. That's ridiculous, right? So I would say that any reader, they're engaging with the content out of choice, like it's clearly labeled. And the way to look at it is metrics. If you're a brand and you want to know whether your native advertising is being trusted as much on a publisher as the normal editorial, ask them for metrics. Be like, we want to know what's your average views, what's your average engagement, and we want to see how we do against that. And then you've got proof. If they're just giving you chat, then
I'd also just add to that, like, I look forward to the John Lewis Christmas ad.
Yes.
Like, I look forward to watching an ad. Like, my niece goes and searches for Play-Doh, how to make Play-Doh ads. I'm like, she's searching for contextual, meaningful content, which can be advertising, which basically is storytelling, and it's meaningful. Like, I think, like, as long as you, like, they're big, grand statements, right? I know it's not as easy as everyone to just deliver on those, but I think, I can see my niece and nephews, like, searching for advertising. It's kind of, and they're watching pre-rolls.
We don't hate brands.
Yeah.
Please. Young people love brands. They use them every day to have amazing experiences in their lives. If you build your strategy on that moment, instead of what you're talking about in the boardroom. If you get out of the boardroom, actually, and go and smoke a joint and just watch the world go by, you will realize that people pick up brands every day and go, oh, that did me a bit of utility, that was fantastic, I'm going to go over here. They're using brands all the time. But we, as marketeers, we forget that moment, and we should build from there and build our strategy on that, and hopefully then we can provide some value for people.
Add value to the conversation is the answer to that question. Chap in the green jacket had a question there.
It was actually building on the last question a little bit. It's kind of in two parts. So I was curious how well this kind of social engagement or social advertising, as it were, translates into sales compared to like previous forms of advertising. And then subsequently, for a brand, would that mean you'd need to increase or reduce your advertising spend to get the same output on the other end?
On average, social advertising is cheaper than the traditional one. Print advertising, period, is cheaper and the analytics on it are way more precise. You can see your customers, the click-through, who bought, where they're from, female or male, how old they are, and then you can build your strategy from there, really. So it's a no-brainer for me.
And from a brand side.
I think even just from like my Net-a-Porter experience, like to give you an example of that, I always gone about the power of Facebook. Like it's like a 10-year-old conversation at this point. But I think the targeting and localization is still incredible because it's contextual. Right, going back to, it's like if I get those BuzzFeed messages like 10 things you're Irish in London. I'm like, oh my god, that's so funny. I really engage with that because it's really contextual to me. But I think like when I was at Net-a-Porter, we were like, oh, Kazakhstan is this like emerging market for us, but there's no print titles there that like we essentially want our brand to be featured in. I wonder if we use Facebook targeting to go after people who live in Kazakhstan, who earn X amount of money, but also read Vogue. Sweet spot. So I think like, and Facebook is 100% a sales driving platform more than anything.
And Mark, Mark, as a head of innovation at the largest scaled up media business in the world, this must be a key question you're trying to answer, right? Like, how does this advertising, this native advertising you're doing, translate into revenue so you can start seeding TV budget, I would assume. So I'm just guessing. So how are you making that argument to Mr. Keith Wood at Weed at Unilever? How are you convincing him to take his billion out of television and give it to Vice?
But the first thing I should say is that the first move I made as head of innovation at Vice was to launch a TV station, which we've just launched last month, and we're coming to the UK with Sky in September. So we launched a 24-hour cable channel in the UK with Sky in September. So it's the least innovative idea ever.
Are you about to tell us that TV is actually more effective than digital and we should keep investing that?
I'm about to say that the whole thing that I say the whole time is always the same thing, which is actually, I would say that we spent so many years worshipping the pipes, so to speak. Like we'd be like YouTube, and then it was like Facebook, and then Twitter, and now Snapchat. And we're basically like, it's like you could see the South Park episode where we all like bow down in front of the new hot, like, tube that we're all supposed to put stuff down. And no one, this is unbelievable to me, no one thinks, I think it's actually not the shiny pipe that people care about, it's the stuff going down it. So Vice goes, right, well, we're going to say, who gives a shit what the new platform is, frankly, right now? Let's make the best stuff in the world. Let's get Spike Jonze, the Oscar-winning director, to come and become part of our company and literally have an office in New York where he sits, and he doesn't make films anymore, he works for Vice. And, and let's literally make the best stuff with the new mentality that we know this new age group has, which is that you can't bullshit them. The only way to get around the bullshit detector is don't bullshit them. And then come with that mentality, that unscripted, real thing. It's like when Harry Met Sally, like, I know a faker when I see one, right? So to speak, right? So do young people. They know when someone's faking it. And brands are faking it. And they're sitting in the boardroom all day long, worrying about how best to fake it. It doesn't matter, because the whole thing is fake and it will fail. So what we did is we came along and said, right, fuck that. Let's make amazing stuff. And then let's think, how can we express that in YouTube? How can we express that and extend that story in Snapchat? How can we make that much more biteable and create a new way into that story through Twitter? And that is how we keep playing all the time. And it's so simple, but I think in this world, look, we're all going insane. There's 100 million notifications coming in. Headspace is going through the roof because everyone's having to meditate to stay alive, basically. We're all going insane. And you know why we're going, good choice. Do you know why we're going insane, right? Because there's no center of gravity. So here's my thing to you. If you're a brand or a human being, find a center of gravity. Mine is to make the best content in the world for the brands that we work with. That's our center of gravity. It gives me sanity. It makes me think if we do amazing things from a strategic framework that makes sense, we'll probably win. And then we can talk about executions after that.
And on that revenue point, we got to wrap up, haven't we? But on that revenue point, you know, I know that BuzzFeed and New York Times, these guys are investing a lot with like Nielsen and Millward Brown to kind of figure out like linking, you know, their native advertising efforts with their sales directly. So have a look at that. There's some interesting research being done in that area. Cool. Do you say thank you? Do I say thank you? I say thank you. And then you've got to do a thing. Okay. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you.